کنفرانس در سنای آمریکا، بسوی صلح و آزادی در ایران، نقش مردم ایران و مقاومت سازمان یافته. سخنرانی‌های کارلا سنز، سفیر آمریکا در دانمارک و جزایر فارو 2017 تا 2021. سناتور سام برانبک، سفیر آمریکا برای آزادی مذهبی 2018 تا 2021، فرماندار آرکانزاس 2018 تا 2011 و مارک گینزبرگ، سفیر پیشین آمریکا در مراکش.
Ladies and gentlemen, senators, ambassadors, distinguished guests, Iran today stands at a historic crossroads. And when I was in Denmark, we actually had attempts at assassinations from the regime in Copenhagen. So it's a worldwide scourge, this regime. But for more than 4 decades, the international community has searched for a response to the crisis created by this ruling theocracy. 2 approaches have dominated: appeasement and war. We've tried both paths, appeasement and war, and now it's time to face reality. Engagement and concessions do not moderate the regime. They embolden it, enabling greater repression at home and aggression abroad. We have military confrontation. It may be forceful, but it can't produce legitimacy. It can't build democratic institutions or create a viable political alternative. It may weaken the regime, and it has, but it can't replace it with freedom. And this is no longer theoretical. Events on the ground have made one fact unmistakably clear. The Iranian crisis cannot be solved from outside. It must be resolved from within. This is not an abstract conclusion, it's a strategic fact. And make no mistake, the Iranian regime is much weaker now than it has ever been, but more repressive against its own people because it fears its own population more than any foreign bombs. More than 2 decades ago, the NCRI president-elect, Mrs. Meriem Rejui, articulated what remains the only viable path forward, a third option. Neither appeasement nor war, but democratic change led by the Iranian people and their organized resistance. The regime, though it's surviving through repression that cannot reform itself, censorship, executions, these beautiful young men with their future ahead of them, and these powerful men that resistance for so many decades, they may have silenced them, but they don't silence us. The only conclusion that can be clear is that only the Iranian people, organized, determined, and supported by a structured, battle-tested, organized force on the ground, can actually bring a new regime. And here lies the reality. It's too often overlooked. The organized alternative does exist. And at its core, it's leading, shaping, sustaining it. And these are the women, the Iranian women. For decades, the world has focused rightly on the oppression of women in Iran. But the other half of the story is even more powerful. Iranian women are not merely victims of repression, they are leaders of change. Leading, yes. They're leading the most organized force in the history of Iran. Over the past 4 decades, they've assumed leadership at the highest levels of the largest, most organized, most enduring opposition movement of Iran, namely the MEK. And this isn't symbolic. It's structural, it's deliberate, it's transformative. They've reached a profound understanding. Their liberation is inseparable from the liberation of their nation that's held hostage by the most misogynist tyrants in the history of the world. And now they choose resistance, and they've become freedom fighters like nothing the world has ever seen before. They've endured imprisonment, torture, and execution. They've sacrificed careers, families, and personal lives, and not for abstract ideals, but to end tyranny and build a free Iran. Under Mrs. Rajavi's leadership, this movement has redefined political struggle. It shattered long-standing taboos and proved through action that women are not only equal participants, but a driving force for change. And this stands in stark contrast to both forms of dictatorship that have shaped Iran's modern history. We're told by some to look nostalgically to the monarchy, but history tells a different story. The Shah's regime was a male-dominated dictatorship sustained by repression, censorship, and the brutality of the Savak. Today, his son seeks relevance, yet he has repeatedly and publicly expressed pride in that era. In fact, just this week, Reza Pahlavi openly defended his father's crimes. He was pressed by the Swedish TV SVT on his family's role in the repression, and he said, "I'm proud of my heritage, my family's history, and everything they have done." Let's be clear. You cannot build a democratic future relying on a dark past, which was once widely rejected by the vast majority of the Iranian people. The Iranian people have overthrown a corrupt, repressive, and one-party system of the Pahlavi dynasty, and they will not go backwards. The Iranian nation is sacrificing their own lives because they're striving for freedom, not putting an unrepentant son of a deposed dictator in a palace to rule them. Across the country, Iranians are demanding fundamental change. And within this reality, the organized resistance, rooted, structured, and resilient, it continues to grow. And this isn't abstract. It's a living, battle-tested movement that has survived the most unthinkable challenges, like none in the history of Iran. When Khomeini invited the MEK to join the government in 1979, they refused and never endorsed him. And they paid a high price for it, with thousands of its members slaughtered by the IRGC and repressive forces. And when the supreme leader issued a fatwa, or religious decree, to execute all MEK members and associates, they stood firm, as many as 30,000 of them were murdered in 1988. And when they were asked to endorse Khomeini's machine of producing regional proxies, they refused and paid a high price again. And when they were asked to endorse the constitution of the regime that would legitimize the absolute clerical rule, they refused and became targets of killings in Iran. Mrs. Rajavi held her ground, and her movement went on the offensive against the regime. They introduced a 10-point plan for the future of Iran, exposed major nuclear sites of Iran, and formed a formidable army. The MEK fought in the courts for 15 years and got itself removed from the list. And they patiently and formed resistance units within Iran. And they expanded it so that in February of this year, 5 days before the US and Israel war on Iran, they used 250 MEK members to launch an assault on the headquarters of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. This movement is what the Iranian people need, and this movement is what the United States needs, and this movement is what the world needs. And Mrs. Rajvi does not seek foreign boots on the ground or imposed solutions. She calls for recognition and an end to the decades of misinformation and marginalization. The United States and the international community now have a historic opportunity. The time for ambiguity is over. The time for choosing sides is now. Recognize that change in Iran is already underway. Recognize that the viable alternative does exist. Recognize the National Council of Resistance of Iran and the provisional government of Mrs. Rajvi have put forward to guarantee that there's a transition from theocracy to a representative government. And such recognition aligns with the will of the Iranian people. So let's be clear. Iran's future will not be shaped by relics of the past. It will be determined by the Iranian people, by their courage, their sacrifice, and their organized resistance. It's a future based on democracy, equality, the rule of law, and the separation of religion and state. It's a future embodied in the vision of Mrs. Rajvi, and she has articulated this in her Jeffersonian 10-point platform for the future of Iran. A free, secular, democratic, non-nuclear republic at peace with its neighbors. So today, let's move beyond illusions, the illusion that the past offers a solution. The path forward is the Iranian people and their organized resistance. And it's time for the United States to stand clearly with them. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be back with you. Ambassador Sands, I associate myself with your remarks. Excellent, great summation of really what we're talking about and what we're fighting about. But I want to recognize the NCRI right at the outset. You have maintained this fight for 50 years. 50 years. And I applaud you for doing that. The NCRI is a group that'll fight. And that's what you've got to have at this point in time, is a group of people who will fight. Thank you for doing that for 50 years. Now, the area in particular I want to hit is the theological beliefs of the people who are now in power in Iran. With what's taken place, the theological views of this Iranian regime cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon or remain in power in Iran. There will be no peace in the region while this regime is in power. That is the blunt point of where we are right now. You have to get this regime out of power. We must have regime change or it will get worse. As weak as the regime will be, it will get worse. Blackmailing, killing, or fleeing of all religious minorities inside of Iran. Thank you for being in this fight so long. God bless you.
I know Madame Rajvi personally. I am proud to be associated with the NCRI. She is a woman of courage and conviction. She has sacrificed her life, and she's brought together the greatest coalition of Democrats abroad and in Iran to oppose this regime. It is not by accident that she and those members of the NCRI have been targeted for assassination and terror repeatedly by this tyrannical regime. Let me make it very clear for those of us who spend a great deal of time talking to our friends in Iran when there's no war, when there is war, and when there is a chance for their lives to be put on the line. They are not interested in a monarchy. They are not interested in a pretender to the throne who has sat in Los Angeles, sunning himself while the people in Iran and the diaspora of Iranian opposition have sacrificed so much. You know, today, it's 7 weeks since the conflict began, and the people of Iran are at a historic crossroads. And the question that we in the United States have is, will the people of Iran be provided the support they need to seize this historic moment to overthrow the tyranny of the mullahs, or will they be compelled to endure another sad chapter of oppression and suffering? The situation on the ground in Iran demonstrates an irrefutable reality. The external military pressure alone will not trigger a collapse of this Iranian regime. Instead, developments inside Iran point to a different possibility, one driven by the people of Iran and the organized resistance movement and the political leadership both inside and outside Iran that lead that political movement, who are capable of challenging the regime domestically. There could never be peace if this regime survives. There will never be peace in Iran. There will never be peace in the Straits of Hormuz. There will never be peace in the Persian Gulf or within the Gulf community until this regime is totally destroyed. The Iranian people expect nothing less. They've been encouraged, coaxed to rise up, but they can't do it alone. Even though the Iranian regime is weaker than at any recent time in decades, it has become simultaneously as repressive as ever. The combination of internal dissent, the organized resistance movements that have been formed and quietly sprung into action by the NCRI, and the loss of regional leverage created by a volatile series of events that they themselves instigated, now compels the United States to recalibrate to align with these realities. She's welcomed the ceasefire as a step towards protecting civilians and lasting peace. She's also emphasized peace and freedom are an inseparable component of Iran's future. And she's called for an immediate halt to executions and recognition of the Iranian people's right to overthrow this regime. Her 10-point program, which she introduced before a session of the Council of Europe in December 2006, encapsulates the aspirations of the Iranian people and the Iranian resistance for a future of Iran. But it's a demonstration of something that had been locked in concrete since 2006, before many an uprising has occurred. Her leadership has coalesced the largest global opposition. I wish one day you could join the NCRI at its global leadership meeting, where hundreds of thousands, I'm kidding you not, squeeze into a convention center outside Paris with parliamentary leaders, foreign dignitaries, and Iranian diaspora to honor the leadership of the NCRI, as well as the domestic opposition forces led by its internal compatriots of the MEK. Her call for a pluralistic republic based on separation in religion, state gender equality, and the abolition of the death penalty, peace, coexistence, and a non-nuclear Iran could be written right here in Pennsylvania in 1776. Okay? As we mark our 250th celebration of our Declaration of Independence, we're not wanting to support the restoration of freedom and dignity to people who want to turn the clock back. They want to enjoy the same life that we Americans do. When Madame Rajvi introduced her transitional framework to establish a provisional government, there was silence in Washington. Who was this person? How dare her stand up and suggest that she could create a government? Well, by golly, her transitional framework has been endorsed around the world by Canadians, by Europeans, by Africans, by Arabs, by Japanese. You need to see the people, the leaders who attend her meetings. Transferring sovereignty to the Iranian people is not some elusive view that the baby Shah says that he's going to do. She's committed to a 6-month period of governance based on the 10-point platform and organizing democratic, free, and fair elections. Acknowledge the role of the MEK inside Iran and the NCRI as parliament in exile as the force, the force for change and transition to democracy. Hold the Iranian regime officials accountable for the crimes against humanity, for killing their own people, for waging global terror and developing weapons of mass destruction and persisting and trying to lie their way through a nuclear program that ultimately would become a nuclear bomb program. Think about the fact that these people, tens of thousands, went into the streets in unorganized protests and were shot in the streets by the Gestapo known as the Besiege, and they had no weapons at all to defend themselves. We can provide them the support they need. We can provide them the diplomatic and intelligence and communications support to break the repressive control that this regime has on the internet.